In 2022, my then girlfriend, we decided to find a flat and move in together. We found a perfect one bed in Birmingham. It wasn't cheap rent by any means, but it was close to our uni and with the allowance she got from her parents and the income from our two part-time jobs we managed it. The biggest impost had been the bond, which left us with very little savings. We knew it would be tough, but we were excited and full of optimism. That changed after the second night. It was jolted awake by Chloe asking, "What are you doing?" I switched on the bedside lamp and she sat bolt upright looking at me in a confused fashion. I'd clearly woken her. I asked what was wrong and she told me she had dreamed there was a figure the foot of the bed, a woman with long hair swaying gently side to side, and that it was so real. It hadn't felt like a dream at all. I almost made a joke of it, but she looked so upset that I bit my tongue and got out of bed to check the room and the rest of the flat. There was nothing. We figured in the end it was just a really vivid dream and went back to sleep. About an hour later, I woke up. This time, it was me who saw the silhouette of someone standing at the end of the bed. A slight figure, definitely female, about the same build as Chloe, but with long hair. Was it her playing a trick on me? "What are you doing?" I asked, only to find myself jolted awake this time by my own spoken words. I'd been dreaming too, and Chloe was fast asleep beside me, mildly freaked out. It took me a long time to get back to sleep. It didn't occur to me until much later that the air in the room when I woke up had been not just cool but downright cold for a balmy evening. The middle of June, when I told Chloe about my dream over breakfast, she reasoned that it was probably not out of the ordinary to dream something like that after having my sleep disturbed, especially after she described it to me while I was still half asleep. "Maybe you were open to suggestion," she said quite reasonably. Something still niggled at me, though. If it was just suggestion, how was it that our versions of what we described seeing in our dreams, the silhouette of a gently swaying woman with long hair, were identical to nights later? Chloe had the dream again, the same, except this time the figure had moved and was standing beside the bed about 2 feet away and looking down at her. Her very clear question, "What are you doing?" had awoken me again, and this time the room was even colder if possible. When I asked Chloe if she was okay, she was angry at the sleep disturbance. "Yes, it's just a stupid dream. I wish she would piss off and let me sleep properly again." It took me a long time to get to sleep. I knew if I had the dream again too, it would possibly mean a visit to the nearest psychiatrist. I didn't, not that night anyway. 2 nights later, it was apparently my turn again. I dreamt I woke up this time. The figure wasn't just standing but was actually leaning over Chloe, the dark shape of its head barely inches from hers, as though it was whispering something to her. I tried to ask the question, "What are you doing?" but this time the words were stuck in my throat. I began to panic. Whatever it was saying to her, I needed to interrupt. I tried to reach out and push the figure away, but just as my voice was frozen, so was my body. Then the figure reached out a hand towards me, and I woke up gasping for air. The room was empty save for Chloe, still fast asleep on her side despite no signs of anything out of the ordinary. My short panting breaths plumed visibly in the cold bedroom air. To say I was shaken would be an understatement, but I didn't mention the nightmare to Chloe. Over the next week we went about our lives as normal, attending classes, studying for exams and working our part-time jobs. And the unease I'd felt after that last nightmare gradually faded away. It wasn't until Saturday of the following week, when I was at a pub with a couple of friends, Sarah and Mick, while Chloe was doing her late shift at Astar, that I brought it up in conversation. Sarah mentioned she dreamt she'd gone to a lecture naked. We had a good laugh and buzzing from 2 pints on an empty stomach. I said, "You call that a nightmare? Let me tell you about a nightmare. Oh, that sounds like a poltergeist," Sarah said after I told her the story. "Do you know if anyone died there?" "No," I scoffed. "I'm sure someone would have told us that." "Not necessarily," she said. "There's no obligation to disclose if there's been a murder or suicide in a property, even if you're selling, so there's definitely no need to disclose it to a prospective renter unless they volunteered the information. You wouldn't know." I brushed it off, but that sobered me up quickly, and of course, when I got home that evening, the first thing I did was Google our address. Nothing. I then Googled murder in our suburb. Nothing. Then finally suicide. I got several hits, all brief news stories in 2021 about the body of a young woman found dead in her flat after concerned colleagues reported she hadn't shown up at work for more than a week later. Stories explained that the coroner had ruled her death a suicide. There was no name or pictures of her in the stories and no mention of the exact address, but I felt certain there was a link. Chloe got home at 11:20 that night. I didn't mention it to her. No point bothering her with anything until I confirmed there was indeed a link. I decided the next day I would take a day off classes and go to see the estate agent. I called the estate agency after Chloe left and scheduled an appointment with Mike, the agent who had helped us lease the flat. He greeted me with a smile, but his expression quickly turned serious when I said, "I have some questions about the flat. How can I help?" he asked, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I need to know if someone died in our flat." "I don't understand," he said, smiling uncomfortably. I unlocked my phone and showed him the screen where I'd left one of the news stories open. The headline read, "Woman found dead in Bury flat. This happened in our flat." Didn't it? Mike paused for a long time before he finally said, "Look, I can't give you any specifics, but yes, there was a tragic incident involving a previous tenant." "What happened?" I asked. "Just what you've probably read in the news stories already. She committed suicide." I really can't say any more than that. I'm not asking for her name or anything, Mike, but have there been any complaints or reports from other tenants or anyone else in the building? Anything strange, noises, dreams? Mike had stood up then and walked over to the window, his back to me. He spoke after nearly a full minute. "The previous tenant," he said, "a middle-aged businessman from South Africa, moved out after less than 2 weeks, just up and left after paying upfront for the whole of his 6-month lease. He didn't say why, but my assistant said he was pretty shaken up about something, and we were the next tenants." He turned and come back to his desk. "Then yes, that's right. Was it in the bedroom?" I asked. "Pair in the bedroom. Did she commit suicide in the bedroom?" It was then I noticed how pale he'd become. He shook his head. "No. The bathtub," he said, his voice breaking. "She slit her wrists in the bathtub. I'm the one who found her." I was shocked and disturbed by this discovery. We couldn't stay in the flat that Much was clear even if it meant forfeiting. The large bond we paid, I was sure Chloe would agree. She was doing another late shift after her class is finished, so I decided I'd tell her when she got home. It wasn't something I wanted to discuss over the phone despite my best intentions. I fell asleep on the bed before she got home, only waking briefly when she slipped into bed beside me. I drifted back to sleep after telling myself it would wait until morning. It was still pitch black when a noise woke me. I stared at the shadowed ceiling, aware that the air was frigid again. With my heart thumping, I looked around the room. There were no shadows or silhouettes or anything out of the ordinary. I reached out to touch Clay, reassure myself she was okay. She wasn't there. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m. I swung my legs out of bed and put on the lamp. I called out her name but got no answer. Worried, I got out of bed and went into the kitchen living area. There was no sign of her. That only left the bathroom. I entered the short hallway at the end. The door to the flat was still locked. The bathroom door on the left was closed. Under the door, I could see that the light was on. I'm not afraid to say I was quite jittery. I knocked on the door and called her name. Nothing. I grasped the doorknob. It was freezing to the touch and slowly turned it, calling out her name one more time. As pushed the door open, what I saw nearly stopped my heart. Chloe was sitting in the bathtub in her pajamas, looking down at her wrists. Chloe, sweetheart, what are you doing? She didn't answer or look at me, and I crept closer until I could see her face. Her eyes were open, but they were strange, far away looking. But not seeing it still haunts me. I reached out and touched her shoulder, and she jolted like she'd been electrocuted. I jumped, barely stifling a scream, but after my initial fright helped her out of the bathtub. She was confused and dazed. I helped her into the living area and I sat her down at the dining table. I quickly got a blanket and draped it around her shoulders and made her a mug of hot chocolate. We didn't go back to bed that night. It turns out Chloe had dreamt she'd run herself a bath and had gotten in. It was so real, Troy, she said to me. The steam off the water, the smell of the soap, having to ease myself in because I'd made the water too hot. But once I was in, I realized I'd forgotten something I needed. But I couldn't for the life of me remember what it was. God, it was so weird. That's when I explained what I discovered about the flat. Needless to say, she was on board with moving out of the flat the very next day. I think our estate agent felt bad about no T disclosing the suicide in the first place, and he refunded our bond when we told him we were terminating the lease. We found another place easily enough, but broke up the next year. Nothing to do with what had happened in our flat in Buray, just a regular, mutually agreed breakup. We promised to keep in touch, and I think we probably will, just because of our shared experience and connection to the poor girl who ended her life in that flat. If you're enjoying the audio stories on Gothic Horror Story, please like, subscribe, and share. It's the best way to help out the channel so we can bring you more content like this.